Jain, welcome back to the week 9 of this course. Today, we are going to explore an important theme within alternative approaches to conflict resolution, that is, functional approaches and regionalism. Instead of beginning with war and peace in the traditional diplomatic sense, we will look at how cooperation in practical, everyday areas can gradually reduce conflict and build peace. As you listen to this lecture, I want you to keep asking, can solving a small technical problems together actually prevent big political conflicts? Take a moment to think of concrete sectors such as water sharing, energy grids, transport links, or trade, and how cooperation in these areas might change the calculus of war and peace. By the end of this session, you should be able to explain what the functional approaches is in international relations, understand how regionalism connects to conflict resolution, and identify how regional organizations such as the European Unions, the African Unions, ASEAN, ECOWAS, or OS helps manage and resolve conflicts. Throughout the lecture, I will encourage you to link each theoretical ideas with at least one real-world regional organization you know of. So keep examples from your readings, news, or general awareness at hand. Moving forward, traditional conflict resolution tends to focus on state and high politics, security, war, border, power, and formal diplomacy. In practice, however, conflicts are rarely only about territory or ideology. They are also deeply tied to resources such as water, energy, and lands, as well as trade and economic inequality, migration, health, environment, and climate change. The functional approach suggests that if states first cooperation in these practical, low politics areas, they can indirectly reduce tensions in the high politics domain. Instead of beginning with peace uh, conferences and ceasefires, what if we begin with electricity grids, river basins management, cross-border infrastructure, or regional trade agreements? This shift in focus from grand diplomacy to everyday cooperation in the core insight of functionalism. So the question is what is functionalism? Functionalism as a theory in international relations is most closely associated with David Matrani, a Romanian British scholar of the mid-20th century. Matrani argued that peace is better served by creating functional international agencies that deal with specific tasks such as health, transport, communication, agriculture, or water management, rather than by relying only on formal political unions or alliances. He believed that people and states will gradually accept cooperation when they see concrete tangible benefits such as cheaper transport, better infrastructure, improved public health, or more stable energy supplies. Instead of starting with let us create a political union, Mitrani suggested starting with let us create an international river authority, an international postal system, or a regional electricity grid, and allowing cooperation to expand over time. Over the years, these webs of practical cooperation could make war too costly and unattractive both economically and politically. So, moving forward, we can break down functionalism into few simple core ideas. First, international cooperation should be built around functions or tasks such as transport, communication, health, agriculture, education, or environmental protection, rather than around abstract political ideas. Second, these technical areas are often less politically sensitive. So, it is easier for rival or historically tense state to begin cooperating there than in high politics domains like security, alliance, or border disputes. Third, success in one functional areas can create momentum for cooperation in other areas. When people see that cooperation works in one sector, they become more willing to extend it to new domains. This process can be imagined at the local level. If neighbors start by sharing a well, they may next share a road, then a market, and gradually become interdependent. It become It becomes harder to fight someone on whom you depend for water, electricity, trade or transport simply because the cost of conflict rise. Now, two important mechanisms are often discussed in the context of functionalism and its later developments: task expansion and the spillover effect. Task expansion refers to the way that once state cooperation on one technical task, new related tasks naturally emerge. For example, if countries create a joint river management system that may later expand to include uh, flood control, irrigation schemes, hydropower projects, and environmental protection measures. Each new task reinforces the habit of cooperation and deepen institutional link between states. The spillover effect described describes how cooperation in one sector create pressure or incentives to cooperation in other sectors. Economic integration in trade and customs can spill over into common standards, joint infrastructure projects, and eventually some degree of political coordination. From a conflict resolution perspective, the hope is that functional cooperation sets off this chain of spillover, making confrontation less rational, and cooperation more attractive, especially in regions with a history of tension. Moving forward, Mitrani and later scholars also talked about how loyalties can gradually shift over time. At first, people in government are loyal primarily to the nation state. Over time, however, as functional agencies deliver real benefits such as cheaper transport, stable electricity, easier cross-border travels, or better public health, better public health, citizens may begin to develop a sense of attachment or trust toward these broader institutions. This does not mean the nation state disappears, but it may means that people feel a dual loyalty to their own state and to a regional or functional organization. From a conflict resolution point of view, this matter because its citizens value regional institutions and see them as protector of their welfare. They will be they will be less willing to support aggressive or highly confrontational policies that threaten these institutions and the benefit they provide. So, moving forward, later, especially in the context of European integration, the theory evolved into non-functionalism associated with scholars such as Ernest Haas. New functionalism took Metternich insight about functional spillover and added more focus on regional integration, especially within a specific geographical region such as Europe. It emphasized the role of regional institutions such as the European Commission as well as non-state actors like business groups, trade unions, professional associations, and interest groups in pushing integration forward. So while classical functionalism was more global and task oriented, neo functionalism focused on regional blocks, exploring how functional cooperation could deepen integration within particular regions, often beyond what national governments initially intended. This is also where functionalism begins to meet regionalism, because the cooperation is not only about functions but about geography and shared neighborhood. Moving forward, speaking of regionalism, it refers to the formation of regional organization or groupings of nearby states, as well as to the broader pattern of cooperation based on geographical proximity and shared interest. Examples of such organization include the European Union in Europe, the Association of Southeast Asian Nation (ASEAN), in Southeast Asia, the African Union AU in Africa, the Economic Community of West African States (ECOWAS), and the Organization of American States (OAS). These organizations are not merely economic clubs, many of them have security dimensions, political dialogues forums, and conflict management mechanisms. Regionalism thus provide an institutional framework that can embed functional cooperation in a specific geographical space, turning abstract ideas about technical collaboration into concrete programs and agencies. So, moving forward, regionalism contributes to conflict resolution in several ways. First, regional organizations create shared institutions where states meet regularly, negotiate, and build habit of dialogue, even when bilateral relations are strained. Second, members often agree to common norms and rules, such as commitments to non-aggression, the peaceful settlement of dispute, and in some cases, minimal democratic standards. Third is regional organization may set up problem-solving mechanisms such as regional courts, mediation panels, fact-finding commissions, peacekeeping forces, or early warning systems because member states share geography and often face similar challenges. Regional organization may understand local conflict better and sometimes acts faster than global bodies such as United Nations. This does not guarantee success, but it does create additional channels for conflict management. So, moving forward, functionalism and regionalism intersect in practice when regional organizations begin with functional cooperation in concrete sectors. This can include regional trade agreements such as free trade areas or custom unions, shared infrastructure projects like energy grids, transport corridors, and communication networks, and common policies on environment, health, migration, or disaster management. Over time, these agreements or these arrangements create economic interdependence, making war extremely costly. They also offer state alternative ways to address grievances through regional mechanism rather than through unilateral action. And they build trust because states repeatedly work together pract- uh, on practical tasks. A classic example is the early European project, which began with cooperation in coal and steel, highly functional sector, and slowly evolved into wider European Union with political and security dimension. In other regions, similar logics can be seen in initiative ranging from cross-border pipelines and electricity grids to regional water sharing agreements. So, moving forward, illustrative examples of regional organization in conflict resolution include the African Union, ECOWAS, ASEAN, and ASEAN. The African Union deploys peacekeeping missions, mediates in civil wars, and promote continental norms against unconstitutional change of government, often acting as a regional stabilizing force. ECOWAS has been active in mediating and sometimes intervening in conflict in West Africa, including in Liberia and Sierra Leone, often combining diplomatic efforts with regional military forces. ASEAN in Southeast Asia emphasizes consensus and non-interference, but still provide a forum for dialogue, confidence building measures, and sometimes regional codes of conduct, even where their successes are mixed or partial. These examples show how regionalism becomes a practical arena for conflict management, rooted in functional cooperation and institutional framework. So, regional functional and uh, regionalist approach can be effective for several reasons. First, neighboring states often have greater proximity and better knowledge of each other's histories, culture, and conflict than distant powers, which can make their mediation more credible and context sensitive. Second, instability in own state frequently spills over into its neighbors through refugees, arms flows, economic disruptions, and extremist networks, giving neighboring state a strong stake in regional stability. Third, regional actors may be seen as more legitimate than external powers, especially if those external powers are suspected of pursuing their own strategic interests rather than local peace. Fourth, small states can pool their limited resources within regional organization to maintain joint peacekeeping forces, early warning systems, or training programs. All these factors make regional functional cooperation an attractive option, although it does not automatically guarantee success. So, moving forward, we must also be realistic about the challenges and limitations. Power asymmetry within regions can mean that dominant state use regional organization to advance their own agendas, sometimes turning collective institution into instrument of hegemony. Sovereignty concerns make many states reluctant to allow regional bodies to interfere in what they view as internal matters, even when those matters have regional implications. Capacity constraints mean that some regional organizations lack sufficient money, trained personnel, or logistical capacity to implement decisions or conduct effective peace operations. Internal divisions arise when members state disagree, are aligned with different external powers, or are themselves parties to the very conflict to the organization is supposed to manage. These limitations show that while functional and regional approaches are promising, their effectiveness varies widely by region, historical context, and issue area. Moving forward, in the post-Cold War environment, we have seen a revival of regional organization as key players in peace and security. The United Nations has increasingly encouraged regional agreements to take the lead in their own neighborhoods. Within the UN, assuming a supportive or coordinating role, this reflects a recognition that regional actors often have better access, greater legitimacy, and a strong stake in outcomes. Moreover, contemporary issues such as terrorism, transnational crime, pandemics, climate change, and resource scarcity make regional cooperation even more necessary because these problems ignore national borders. These today functional approaches are visible in regional counterterrorism framework, shared intelligence platform, joint uh, distress response or disaster response mechanisms, and cross-border infrastructure projects. In all these cases, conflict resolution is not only about negotiating ceasefire but also about building resilient regional system that can absorb shock and prevent disputes from escalating. So, to recap, functionalism argues that cooperation in technical and economic areas can gradually reduce the likelihood of political and military conflict by creating interdependence, trust, and shared institution. New functionalism extend the idea within specific regions, highlighting how spillovers and regional institutions can deepen integration over time. Regionalism, in turn, provide the organizational framework within which functional cooperation become concrete programs, agencies, and mechanisms for managing and resolving conflicts. For your own thinking and research, I encourage you to consider which functional area in your region of interest, such as water, energy, trade, transport, or climate, offer the greatest potential for building peace, and whether existing regional organizations are strong enough or what reforms would make them more effective in conflict resolution. In the classroom, you, uh, I would request you to discuss and uh, raise more inquiry and discussion debates on this thing so that you will be able to understand that how these theoretical concepts are grounded into analytical uh, understanding uh, of our societal or of conflict in the our environment. I close this lecture here with these questions and would request you to look deeper into these theories with the understanding of example. Thank you.